So that means each one of them is going to have 15 minutes, and at the end, there's going to be a 15-minute slot for discussion. Please keep posting any questions in the chat box as we go, and we will aim to answer as many as possible. So let's all now welcome our next speakers, Julie, Liz, and Rebecca White from Imperial College London. The title of the presentation is People Are More Likely to Speak Behind the Screen, Exploring the Hidden Affordances of Running a Large-Scale Interactive Event Online. Let's see, I believe they are already, yes, excellent. I can see all three of you, that's great. Is everything all right? Connection, cameras, sound check, yes, perfect. That's very, very good. And should I hand over then to Julie? We can start in a couple of minutes. Right, yes?
Sure, yeah. Hi everyone, I just thought we'd quickly introduce ourselves first. So my name is Rebecca White, and I was the coordinator on the pre-sessional course this summer, which we're going to be talking about. Julie?
Yeah, hello, good morning. I'm Julie Hartill. I'm the Deputy Director of the Centre, and I direct the pre-sessional courses and was overseeing it this summer.
Hi, I'm Liz Chiu, and I'm the Deputy Director of Pre-Sessional Courses, but I also have responsibility for listening and speaking provision throughout the year.
So today we're going to be talking about two large-scale interactive events that we ran. But before we begin, I'd just like to get a sense of what your experience has been so far. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. We were inspired by Nick Peachy yesterday using Mentimeter, so we've decided to use it again. So if you'd just be able to either open a browser, open a new browser, go to menti.com and enter in the digital code. Or you can scan, just realized I think I need to, oh yes, it's presenting. Or you can scan the QR code here, because we've got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, we're interested to know, what interactive events do you usually run on face-to-face courses? Are there any that you run? That could be poster events, it could be research festivals, it could be cafes that you might run. Or anything else. And so we've got the code. See if anyone's, okay, student conference. We've got. So the code for Mentimeter is 605780. Poster presentations, conversation clubs, student-led seminars. Well, that sounds nice. Oh, online karaoke, brilliant.
That's great.
Project presentations. Poster session. Again, discussion panel. That sounds nice. This is great. We're getting ideas for our own. Okay, skits. Poster, spelling bees. Brilliant. Video competitions. Okay, I'll move on to the next question now, which is conversation.
As you do that, Rebecca, I'm just going to say it's quite interesting to notice that poster presentations is the one that's coming out as the most common. So that's going to link quite nicely to what we're going to talk about.
True. Yes. Okay, so. Okay, that's brilliant that quite a lot of people have been doing interactive events online. That will make for a really nice discussion at the end of this to compare people's experiences. That's really helpful for us to know. I'm really curious to know actually what this will be. Okay, so that's good to get a sense of things. I'm going to stop sharing now and Julie can introduce what it is we'll be looking at, but really good to know that people have been still sticking with the online presentations this year. I'll move on to the next question. Throughout the session, if you've got any questions, you could just put them in here or in the chat. But, Okay, so I'll stop sharing. I'll pass over to Julie.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Give me a second. Hope we're okay. No. So we decided this summer, but we're going to talk, our starting point is perhaps more in line with where Phil's was in terms of online learning and teaching. Obviously, we were moved online very quickly. We were in the emergency category, I suppose, this summer. And what we'd like to tell you, is show you is a little bit about how we worked and what we did, but also and how we particularly focused on speaking and how the hidden benefits of that became evident when we got to the end of the course. So that's the focus of what we're going to talk about, and the quote is from a student, which we'll come to in a little while. So we're going to show you some of our face-to-face course, and we're going to show you some of our online course as well. Our starting point was really that I wanted to say, well, this is where we thought we were going to be. I don't know if you know anything about Imperial, but it's a STEM university, so we work exclusively with students of science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine, quite a mouthful, but those are the students that we work with. And this is where we thought we would be, with about 123 students, mostly from China, but not entirely. And in fact, the reality was that we were working with 123 students online using Microsoft platforms, particularly using Teams, which I'll come to in a while, in groups of 12 mostly as we went through. So how did we get from what was a large blended face-to-face course and move that online? That's what we want to explain to you. And our starting point really, as we give you an overview of the course, was to work with Microsoft. So just to tell you what's coming up, we will tell you a little bit about the course and how we're using Microsoft and why we're using Microsoft, and that's where I am going to refer back to what Phil's just been talking about. The need for interaction for our students in particular. At this point, I'll hand over to Liz, how we moved online, and then also course feedback, and Rebecca's going to talk about that, and then how we got feedback from students and what we found from that feedback and what we can learn moving forwards. Okay, so I think the starting points for our online course were that we were in a good place because we had already explored what was available to us. We had Blackboard. We decided that Blackboard was not where we wanted to go because we wanted to redevelop our course so that it was task-based and interactive. We have a very careful model where the course is scaffolded carefully so that the work that students do in class is cumulative, it's iterative, and that we build towards their final assessments. The assessments are designed for STEM needs, and there's quite a positive washback from the tests that we do back through the course in terms of writing, but especially in terms of speaking. We have a very carefully designed listening and speaking component, which builds from listening first of all, developing group working, then moving towards practice and towards the final speaking assessment, which is a Viva. We have very much an Imperial focus. The students are very motivated by Imperial. They're very excited to be coming to Imperial. So we use Imperial work, we use Imperial research, and we try to build a sense of community. So this is our live course when we're on campus. And I think our first reaction was, oh my God, how are we going to do this online? We know that this is what we want to do. We know that this is what our students need to be able to do. It needs, we take students who maybe don't necessarily like to talk a lot, perhaps who like to code, who like to do maths, and so on, and we're really giving them a different experience from IELTS, and we had to now do this online. So what was going to happen? Well, after our first oh my God moment, how are we going to do this, we decided that this was an opportunity that we couldn't miss, to be honest. We had found already, going to our university and finding out what there was available, and this was really the key point for us, and it happens about 3 years ago, and what we found was that Microsoft was available to us, and so we've been using Microsoft Teams in particular, but we've been using other apps as well. And what this opportunity was, and what we realized the opportunity of this particular situation was, is that whereas we've been using OneNote notebooks for example, and Teams, but really using them separately, we realised that if we use Teams as the integration, as the communication hub and the hub for all work that we were going to do, then we could really quite seamlessly start to integrate the work that we wanted to do, and that we could also integrate various apps that would help us deliver and give students the practice that they needed and help us create these online events as well. I just want to say, if you do use Microsoft Outlook quite regularly, PowerPoint and Word, and you have an institution Microsoft subscription, I don't know if you know about the waffle or if you ever click on the waffle, but the waffle leads you into a journey of great discovery if you haven't done that already, because you'll find that you've got a whole range of Microsoft apps available to you. And what we discovered, first starting with OneNote and then moving to Teams, was gradually we could integrate other apps to be able to bring everything together quite seamlessly, and that was our real bonus. What you can see here is a team, and I think when we took the teachers on this summer, they would never have imagined that they would be responsible. They would be a member of about 5 different Microsoft teams, and that they would be responsible for managing 2 teams. But that's in fact what they did. We worked with them, we trained them, and we had ongoing professional development just by using the software throughout the course. Each team, and this is the integration and the seamlessness of the way that the platform works. We created class teams, we gave them a general channel and a classroom channel, and we linked a class notebook to each team. And the way that that looks is like this. So the student comes into the team, or the teacher comes into the team, they click on the class notebook, and then they get this page. They can open out the notebook more, and then they have the option of opening it in a browser. When they open it in the browser, they're inside the notebook. And this is where what could have been PDFs was then redesigned and rewritten, modified, I think probably we would say, according to the AMR model, was modified into a plan of work. So we also had to cut down our contact hours. So we set out the work for every session, for every week and every session in the class notebook, instead of using an online platform like Blackboard. We created a checklist for students so their learning was on track. We redesigned, redeveloped our course to include autonomous asynchronous elements, and we created what we called ACT pages. And this is where you start to see the benefit of using the OneNote for these tasks. This, by the way, is in what's called the content library. So all of this is read-only and is really acting like a textbook for the students. We're moving now to think about poster presentations, and we're asking the students to prepare for the posters. They've got embedded videos in there that they can watch. They will do the work. They can add the work to their own section within this notebook. They can copy and paste anything that they like from the notebook. And they do some in-class work as well. And then we set out homework for them too. And here's an example with the homework where we've got an embedded form, just directly again in the OneNote, accessible from the team straight to the OneNote class notebook. And there we've got a video embedded in a form. And if I scroll down a little bit for you, you can see that there are questions and answers. The student can submit that, and then the teacher will be able to access the answers and go through them and discuss anything the student is unsure about. So this is really what our opportunity was. And what we want to do now is, if I come out of this and go back to my slides, just bear with me for a second, is talk about how using these OneNotes and using this approach, we managed to create our interactive events. We had to modify the structure and redesign them, and that's what we want to show you is what the real life version, the face-to-face version looked like, if you like, and then how we changed it to do it online. So at that point, I'm going to stop and I'm going to hand you over to Liz.
Okay, thanks, Julie. And I think I'm sharing my screen now. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Yeah. So we're moving on from where Julie left off. just a reminder that this is Imperial College London, and you may have seen us quite a bit this year on the news actually. What you're looking at here are images of our pre-sessional students, and our aim with the pre-sessional is not so much to test them as to prepare them for joining the Imperial College community. And our students are pretty much indistinguishable on the face of it if you consider their science. They've achieved the level that's required to be scientists, engineers, and medical researchers at Imperial College. This is what we normally do. These are images from our previous pre-sessional. And of course, the challenge was how to move this online. We do have one really useful resource, which is that we teach in-sessionally a whole range of listening and speaking classes. And the students who come to those might be PhDs, they might be postdocs, visiting academics, they might be all kinds of researchers, and a lot of them are GTAs, graduate teaching assistants. They attend our listening and speaking classes through the year, and they're very happy to have an opportunity to come and speak to our students in the summer. So that's a great resource for us. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context here by showing you this YouTube video of the Imperial Fringe. I hope you can hear my, well, I'm not sure if you need to hear it, but can you hear my sound? Let me just stop that. I hope you got a kind of flavour of what it's like. Could you hear the sound? I'm just interested to know, Julie, can you tell me if you could hear the sound?
Later on, towards the end, yes.
Okay, so I'm now sharing the audio, which should work now for the other clips. I hope that gave you an idea of the kind of community that our students are joining, but that was also my starting point for developing a new kind of interactive event. We tried to replicate this Imperial Fringe, where researchers once a month approximately will put on this outreach exercise where anybody can come in off the street and just meet a researcher and talk to them about what they're doing. And it just seemed to me a perfect kind of event for us to run with our pre-sessional students. So that's something that we set out to do. We've been running now for 4 or 5 years, very successfully. 2 points about EAP for STEM. I guess it doesn't really need to be said, but explaining complex science is really hard. Takes a lot of processing just to explain it in your own language. To do it in another language is it's very demanding, and especially when we're talking about pre-sessional students who might be coming to us with an IELTS 5.5. It's very demanding. The second thing is that students' topics are not understood by the teachers, so that conversation is already quite a difficult one. We therefore have a specialist subject workshop strand in which the students teach each other and discuss with each other about their own specialist subjects. But what we see is that the students absolutely have to have science interaction. I think we would be failing them if we let them leave the pre-sessional course without that interaction. And so running this type of event for us was not a kind of nice add-on or an optional extra. It's absolutely intrinsic to the course that our students get this type of interaction and the chance to see themselves as scientists and part of the community. So we moved a few years ago to assessment by Viva because we wanted our assessment to be learning oriented, and practicing for the Viva creates a positive washback throughout the course. So we have cycles of observing good model speakers, practicing that, getting feedback and giving feedback to each other, improving on it, and then there'll be another event for them to take that further and to build their skills. All of the skills they're building will help them to pass the Viva, but it will also feed forward to their future studies, and that's the really important part of it. We assess interaction, communication, language, and delivery. We give no points for memorization or performance. We moved away from assessing presentations some time ago. So today we're just going to look at 2 live events. We do normally run a Café Scientific, which we also run through the year. We also would normally have 2 poster events during our 6-week course. One at which the students of the 6-week course are presenting to the 3-week course students, and the other way round. Our 3-week course students present to us our 6 weeks. So this is really what we're trying to do. Give them a chance to interact with Imperial College researchers and give them a chance to speak like Imperial College researchers, because this is the aim, is for them to become participants in the Imperial College community. And we hope that we help students to find their voice. That's what we have managed to do. So I'm going to introduce to you the Research Fest that we put on every year in our pre-sessional course. We invite researchers from across Imperial College. I do that by going to those Imperial Fringe events that I just showed you on YouTube and speaking to the researchers. And if I can find anybody that is a really enthusiastic communicator, I absolutely don't care what their English is like. If they're an enthusiastic communicator, they're a good example of what our students are aiming for in the pre-sessional course. So the students will get that experience of genuine science interaction, and the researchers will provide a model. And that model is very, very varied. I'd just like to show you how varied that model might be. So I've got 3 short video clips of speakers at our Research Fest events when it was face-to-face. The first one, I don't know if you can hear me if I'm showing the video, but the first one is a very experienced research fellow who comes every year to, she loves coming and talking to our students. And I think you'll see from her interaction that she's used to communicating her science to a range of different people in different audiences.
They won a lot of Nobel Prizes for solving structure of the ribosome. It's a very, very, very important part in your cell, the site of protein synthesis. Yes, so they won the Nobel, and that's how they. And you know how many years it took them to grow them? Maybe 25 years. It's not easy.
And sometimes some proteins are hard to guess as crystals. Yeah, especially. Yeah.
I know in some groups of the labs where people retired and died, and still they are still working on getting crystals. Because proteins don't like to crystallize. They're happy being in the water. In fact, if they crystallize in the body, they can be even harmful. For example, cataract is a protein crystalline which is getting opaque and getting crystallized.
I'm sorry if the sound was a bit low. Was the sound quiet for you there? I can't see any way of turning the sound out. It plays more loudly normally. That's an example of a first language speaker by my definition, and doing a great job as a model for how you might explain complicated science to people who don't know your subject area. And she's speaking to a student who is in fact from her subject area, and so he was really interested to learn from her. The second clip is of actually an undergraduate speaker from the Drones Society who came to speak and show our students his drones.
So this is communicating with radio. You see this antenna over here? Boom. This antenna is communicating with this antenna. And I think it's 5.8 gigahertz radio signal transferring from here to there. And this particular board is also able to record high definition video. So it'll be able to do 1080p if you have an SD card there, and you can pull out the data after you've done your flying, so you can showcase that. Yes.
Okay, I chose that clip because the speaker again is a first language speaker. He speaks very fast. I don't know if you could see the looks on our students' faces. They really wanted to understand what he was saying. They were looking, they may well be electrical engineers themselves, but they're struggling to hear and understand at that speed. The third example that I want to show you is of, in fact, one of our in-sessional students. So this lady came to us for speaking and listening classes throughout the year, and then really wanted to share, to have the opportunity of speaking at one of our live events. And she came along and spoke to our students about tissue culture. I should mention that the people listening to her, these three young gentlemen, are in fact civil engineers, and that has some relevance to how the conversation goes. I hope you can hear this.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah, it can be a bone. Yeah, it can be. So this one, like usually your ear is like flexible, so it's usually a cartilage, but you can also recreate bone. That's correct, and so that can be used to treat some other types of injury.
So our body will resist the part, this part, resist.
So usually it's actually, it wouldn't have any immune reaction to it because it's used. So basically this material is very biocompatible, and then the cells will repopulate it with your own cells, or what you can do, you can just donate some of your cells to some facility and they'll expand them, so they'll grow more of these cells, and then basically this construct will be made out of your own cells, so the body will actually have no adverse reaction to it, like if everything goes fine, of course.
Well, I don't know about you, but I could feel his frustration there at being a scientist and being in a science event, being a member of this Imperial College community, trying his best to have that conversation, but perhaps not really following anything that the speaker was saying. This is our aim. So we give them this Research Fest event in week 3 of a 6-week course, and in week 4 on the Monday the students will be the presenters. So they plan together in pairs, they work together to ask each other questions, to put together a poster, and on the Monday they present those posters to, as I said, new incoming students. So they have a real audience. It's not any kind of pretend event. They get to meet the new students and find the people from their own department, so they can get to know them in advance. The aim is always to develop the confidence and the courage to speak at this kind of event. And the students really appreciate the fact that they can behave like scientists. Now our civil engineers will be talking about civil engineering. So although it's only a few days later, they will find their voice. And when I go to look at their poster, they will be able to explain something to me because it's their field. So I think that's a really important point. Don't ask a civil engineer to present on tissue culture. Never going to work. So here's an example of our poster presentations, and this is a student speaking. He was speaking about his robotic arm. He's from computing, and the person he's speaking to is from medicine. But they found that they had an area in common, and that they could have a very interesting conversation on this topic of the robotic arm.
We're trying to use this like a little implantable
electronic sensor. That means these sensors can be implanted into your residue arms, and then they can make sure it's as close as possible to the neuron cells, the single neuron cells. And then after this EEG method, they already know about which part of a neuron cells is in charge of a movement of which part of your body. Then they can match them together. And then after they collect this information, they will perform this movement, to the artificial limbs. Two ways, right? Yeah, this is a next step of this way. First, before we can do the next steps, we have to do a surgery and to put this in our arms. We have to do a surgery. So that mostly for the disabled person, but for a normal person, if you want to control like a air conditioner with your mind, we have options for you. You know, we have the EEG. That means you can use just like your head to collect the signal from the brain, from this primary motor cortex. Yeah, some area will be activated when.
Okay, so that's the example of our speaking event, the posters, and you can think to yourself, how are you going to replicate that online? And Rebecca's going to show us in a moment just how we did that. At this point, can I ask if you have any questions, that if you go back to the Mentimeter, use the same code. So just put menti.com into your URL bar. Just open a new tab in your browser. If you type in just menti.com, it'll come up and it'll ask you for a code. It's 605780, or you can scan the QR code using your mobile phone. And you should be able to find now a question that gives you an opportunity to ask us any questions. So just type in there any question that you'd like to ask us. And if you could have a look when you're submitting, have a look at the other questions that have been asked. If it's already been asked, just put a like to show that you like the question that's already been asked. That'll help us to choose which questions. Don't just type the same question again and again and again, if possible. Is that okay?
I'm going to hand over at this stage, Liz. Yes, okay, right. I was going to say we could.
Do we have any? So, shall I hand over to Rebecca? I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'll have a quick look in the chat as well to see if there were any other questions going on there.
Okay, so I'm going to now talk about how we did this year. So as Liz mentioned, we really did, were events that we really valued and were a key part of the course, and we really didn't want to lose them. And I've just got here the aims of the interactive events, because these aims in many ways were all the more important in 2020. So we've talked a lot on this conference about the challenge of developing the fluency and interaction skills on an online course. And these events were a really valuable opportunity for rich interaction and genuine interaction as well. We've also talked a lot in this conference about creating a sense of community. And without these events, we felt that there really wouldn't be much of a sense of community in our online course, because students were otherwise only interacting with their classes and their teachers. They weren't getting that wider sense of the course as a whole. Also to engage with research of college. So again, this was always an aim of ours, but given that students were now sitting in their own living rooms or their own bedrooms, they probably didn't have much of a feel for Imperial College, and that's a great source of motivation for students. So we really wanted to keep that, and also it amplified the student experience. So we were really keen to try to achieve these aims, but the big challenge was, how were we going to do that online? Which is what I'm going to talk to you about. So some challenges, I'll just go through these quite quickly. It was our first time doing it. That seems like an obvious point, but we really didn't know until the course started how well the technology would work. So we were teaching online from April, but that was only with small groups. It wasn't a large scale course like this one. So until the course started, we really didn't know how it would all work, and the interactive events took place in week 3 and week 4, so we didn't have long to see if the technology would work. And also, we didn't have a clear idea of how it would go, and without that clear idea, we weren't able to communicate that to teachers and students. There was also limited experience of all participants, so I think at that stage, we could assume that probably the teachers and the students didn't have a lot of experience of attending online events. I might be wrong, but if you think about for a face-to-face presentation, students can draw on all of the experience they've had of seeing face-to-face presentations, and so they've had plenty of models, and the same goes for teachers. They didn't have much experience. If they didn't have much experience of online events, then giving students that support and that guidance was more challenging. Also achieving the flow. So these courses were really carefully structured so that each interactive event had asynchronous elements beforehand to help students, help prepare students, and afterwards, and the research event helped to prepare the online event, as Liz mentioned. But how do we achieve that flow? How do we help students to see the link between these activities and these events? Everything in the online environment can feel more discrete. So that was a challenge, and also recreating the dynamism of these events. That was a really key challenge and something that we wanted to achieve. So just really quickly, questions that guided development. These were some of the more practical considerations. First of all, we weren't even sure whether students would be able to move between the posters or the stands in the case of the research event, because as I said, we didn't know how the technology would work. So we thought perhaps students would just have to have one audience for the whole event, but then that would be a real shame because they wouldn't get that experience of coming and going, the movement, people choosing to go to your event. Would students receive feedback? We were concerned that that raises the stakes of the event. If you introduce feedback, it meant that if students dropped out, then they would lose out on that opportunity for feedback. And it changes the nature of it as well. Suddenly it's an event to get feedback from your teacher rather than an event to learn something and to teach something. How can we make sure each pair had an audience? That was a really practical consideration, because in a live event, you can easily see, look around the room and see who doesn't have an audience. And then you can go over, and it's not long before someone goes over. In the online event, we actually, in the end, assigned one talk that each student had to go to make sure that for each student, they would have at least 2 other students and their teacher. That was something we'd never had to think about in the past. And how can we maximize student interaction? That was really at the front of our minds as we planned and as we implemented these online events. So I'll just show you what it looked like now. So this is our, as Julie showed you before, all of the teaching took place in teams. This was a team for the whole cohort, but students, these rooms here, when we were teaching, these were breakout rooms that students could move between. So they were very familiar with this. And so we hosted the events in this team. You can see here there are 12 rooms, and this little this video icon means that there's a meeting happening in each room. So I'll just show you as an attendee what the experience was of moving between the poster events. Oh, sorry. That didn't. Okay, so then you click on the room to join. Takes a minute to load. Then you can, when you join the room, you see there's the poster that the students are presenting, and there are the students down the bottom. Then if you want to change rooms, you can go back to the team, just click on another room. and it takes a minute to load, but then you're in and you're in a new presentation. So this is what it looked like. This is what the experience was for participants. And I'll just show you now what actually the events look like inside those rooms a bit more closely. So here we've got, this is Research Fest. Liz has already shown you a video of what it looked like in 2019. This is what it looked like in 2020. I'll just show you so you get a flavor of it. So this is the video we saw before. And this is what the Research Fest room looked like in 2020.
Yeah, I wonder, is it possible to use your conclusion to make a strategy to let everyone cycle for protecting our environment and apply it to our countries?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. That's the aim of my research, really. So you summarized it really well. So you got the idea really well. That's the aim of my research, to actually be able to make cycling more accessible for everyone. And the way I was studying that is that in the model, there were different variables and different also behavioral stages. So those variables and those stages would give extra information on how those cycling policies, so that promotion of cycling should be made in regards of the different environment and the different behavior of people. So that's on one side. And the other part of your question.
Okay, so you can see it's perhaps less buzzy, but in terms of what we were aiming for was rich interaction, and hopefully you agree that this is what we managed to achieve here, and we really weren't sure if we would be able to. So in terms of the differences, Julie will talk about this in more detail, but you can see there's not that background noise before that, which was a strain to people. It's more immediate. Everyone is facing the camera. You can see everyone. Everyone's an equal participant as well, so there's not someone kind of hovering awkwardly at the back of the crowd wanting to look. So it was different, and we thought it wouldn't be as good, and I think we felt it was as good, really, if not better in some ways. So sorry, I'll show you now. That was Research Fest. I'll show you the poster event, what it looked like in 2019 compared to 2020. So, sorry. So here is an example.
And the control is the driver, they make the...
Okay, so that's just a quick example from 2019. Here isn't it? So this is what it felt like to be in the room in 2020.
Our lab surrounding. So is that clear until now? Do you have any questions about the history of our CCGM?
Yes, could you give me a brief definition of CCGM? I don't really know what it exactly is.
Of course, a CCGM is you can consider it as a composite of clay, cement, and additives. We will use the clay, cement, additives as well as water to use their interaction to create the CCGM material. Is that clear?
Okay,
so,
I get it.
So I got the question. So the CCGM can bear the temperature under the water?
Yeah, of course. It's necessary for the materials underwater.
In what extent the CCGM can afford the temperature? Maybe minus 100 degrees Celsius or maybe more?
Well, generally speaking, cement and clay can stand with a very high temperature, and in the underwater surroundings, the temperature will not be that high.
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. If that is clear, I will continue with my introduction. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so you can see again, really different type of experience. Much more intimate, much more immediate. You can see the slide. Everyone is really there as an equal participant. Anyone can chip in with a question. So those were our live events. Another important, so I mentioned earlier that really at the forefront of our minds this entire time was how do we make sure that, how do we maximize interaction? And this is where the asynchronous components came in, which I briefly mentioned before. So we carefully staged these events and prepared students for that interaction. So we did that in a number of ways. We got students to look at model speakers doing poster presentations from previous years, analyzing their discourse features, that kind of thing. Obviously, it was from face to face though, so not ideal. And one of the things we did was get students to make, I don't know if you're familiar with Flipgrid, probably some of you are, or maybe you all are, which is where you can make a video of yourself. So students made a video of themselves talking about their posters and giving an overview. But before they did that, we got researchers to do that, the researchers from Research Fest. And students could watch their video overviews. I'll just show you an example. I'll show you Esther's one here.
Hello everyone, my name is Esther and I'm doing my research at the Center for Environmental Policy. I'm a PhD student in my last year and I would like to explain a little bit about what I'm doing in my PhD thesis. So I'm working in the associations of the built and social environment with cycling behavior. And what I've sent you is already the diagram of my statistical model in which there are an outcome variable and explanatory variables as well.
Okay, so I'll just pause it there. So this getting the researchers to make a video achieved a number of aims to help students, prepare students for these events. The key thing that did is it gave students a set of models, a really large set of model speakers. If we think each of these are 2 minutes, there's a lot of them to look at. And then they can select from them which model speakers they would like to speak like. They can watch them in their own times, many times as they like, throughout the course to help them prepare for their posters and their Vivas at the end as well. It also helped to break the ice, so it felt like students weren't meeting this researcher for the first time in the room. It helped prime students to ask questions. And so it really, these asynchronous elements, and as I mentioned, we got students then to do one of these as well before they did their poster event. And that was a key part of maximizing the interaction. So there I've shared some of my reflections on running these events, but Julie's going to look in more detail at what the teachers and what students thought and how they responded.
I am. Right, there we go. Okay. Let's wait for that to load. Yes, I'm going to run through some of the feedback that we got, but I think before we go any further, I think one of the things I've forgotten to say is that none of us is a learning technologist. We started as teachers. I don't know if I made that point right at the start. We found out what software was available to us, but certainly no technology support was available to us in any way. And so what we decided to do was use what was available to us that we could manage ourselves without any tech experience as such from the word go. And then we've built our knowledge and expertise and we've shared it. And that's what you're seeing at the moment. With that, as far as we've got after 3 years, starting out just with class notebook. So as we've got to the stage of recreating interactive events online, we're really interested in how successful these events were. We had a student questionnaire, we had 2 teacher focus groups, there was a staff debrief with a questionnaire and a coordinator's review. And so what I'm going to share with you is some of the more representative comments that we had. Perhaps the first place to start was really just very quickly flash up a recap of the aims of these interactive events: developing fluency, interaction, community, engaging with the college and its research, and improving and enhancing the student experience. This first global set of feedback comes from student course questionnaires. Let me just double check the numbers that we had. That's right. So we had 123 students. We had 64 students submitted a response to the questionnaire. And I think you would agree that the feedback that we had, and you kind of, I think I always make the assumption that if someone's very dissatisfied, they'll fill in the feedback questionnaire. If someone's very satisfied or has something to contribute, they'll fill in the questionnaire. And there's a large lump in the middle that you just have to assume it's probably okay. And so with 64, we've got a reasonable number. We've got 50% of the cohort to be able to work with. And perhaps the most gratifying result of the whole set really is the fluency and interaction, where students did recognise that even though we were working online, that the pre-sessional helped to improve their communication skills in preparation for their studies. They also, majority of them, in fact, 57 of them agreed that they had managed to develop some sense of community. And I think that is a really positive and really reassuring result for us, because this is where we work very hard to create community, to make students feel part of the college when they're with us face to face. And we really wanted them to have as much of that experience as we could recreate online. And the fact that only actually one student disagreed that there was any sense of community, I think was a really positive result, actually. We can do better, we'll work harder next time, but I think that was a really good starting point. Engaging with research, only 2 said that they felt that they didn't engage with research, and then the rest of them, 55 of them, said that they were confident and felt that they had engaged with research. And the vast majority regarding the student experience strongly agreed that the pre-sessional had helped them develop their sense of identity as a student at Imperial. That's about as far as we can go with a comment on the student experience, really. But again, I think that is a really positive result. I think we take heart from that and think, yes, this online has something to offer. We certainly can modify, redefine what we're doing perhaps online to create similar experiences for the students. So those are the global aims. If we move to think about the detail on the interactive learning events, if I just summarise really what Liz and Rebecca have been saying about the learning objectives, because this has always been our starting point. We've always started with the learning objectives. And then we've thought about what we want to teach, how we can teach it, and what tools will help us to do that. We never start with, this is online, what can we use to do it? We always start with, these are our students, they need to be able to do this, how can we help them learn? So obviously they need to be able to listen globally and intensively, they need to be able to ask and respond to questions, they need to be able to work in groups together, present clearly to a general audience, and be able to respond to those audiences as well. And I think even just from the videos that Rebecca was just showing, you can see that the students really were having a good interaction. They had a good understanding of how they could interact online and were trying to adapt to the needs of their listeners. If we look at some of the particular feedback, these are representative comments. Students were given task reflections. Some had an option, they all had an optional learning journal, which wasn't necessarily taken up by all of them, I have to say. But if you look at the reflections, and these are simply asking, how did it go? What do you think about that event? And how would you move forwards? What would you do differently? What have you learned? I think it's really positive and really reassuring to see that students can see that they now know how to talk academically. They understand that they're moving away from IELTS, that they're moving away from their informal interactions and talking with their friends, and starting to see the need to explain technical ideas in a particular technical way, in a way that an audience is expecting. And also that the need to listen. I liked student 3's reflection, who'd really taken on board the fact that they need to be able to understand before they give information back. And as one of our learning objectives, I was really reassured to see that, and really that made me feel very positive about the whole experience. And then also for student 4, this was a journal comment, so a little bit more reflective. And again, my observation, having done this for many years, we've tried to get students to work in groups. We've encouraged group work in various ways. We've had explicit teamwork teaching when we've been face to face. Encouraging group work this year was one of the challenges and was one of the concerns that we had. But I really feel that perhaps more than any year, we managed to succeed with group work this year, because the group work wasn't something that we were forcing. or artificially. It was emerging from the tasks that we were setting from the breakout rooms, from these shared spaces that the students had. And that students were really recognizing that when they're working like this, not in a big morass of other students, but working in these smaller spaces, that cooperation and collaboration was really important, and that they could gain a lot from working like that. So those are some of the student reflections. Looking at the more hidden benefits, really, the affordances, was that students really recognised, and Liz's point about developing confidence and developing courage, you know, I can talk more bravely. I thought, and it wasn't the only time, I saw brave mentioned 4 or 5 times in the student feedback, which is why that particular comment is there. They can see that actually they have, by working with students from all over the world, they have developed a little bit of a sense of community. Perhaps not the sense of community of researchers that they might have gained if they'd been face to face, but as they weren't feeling alone or as if they were sort of isolated particularly. And although, to be fair, the majority of students did want to work face to face, and that's fair enough. You know, when they looked at our course online, we were advertising a face to face course. They didn't sign up for an online course, the majority of them. So I'm not surprised that probably 50% of them said, you know, this was good, I enjoyed it, this worked well, this was positive, this was a good experience for me, I'd like to do it face to face. But there were still comments from students saying, I enjoyed this experience, it's convenient, it's flexible, you know, it gave me confidence in a different kind of way. The quote, the one that made us think most, I think, when we were going through student feedback, saying that the online course, they made the presentation more difficult. It's more difficult to speak formally, but actually it's much easier to chat because you aren't that close in proximity, that you can be more yourself, perhaps. You're feeling a bit less constrained if you're online and behind the screen. And I think we need to bear that in mind and remember that for some people talking online, if you're not a people person, we're all English teachers, we're probably by definition all people, but there are a lot of students who study science, technology and medicine, engineering, for example, who perhaps not, you know, they like sitting at their computers. And so to have that opportunity to not be quite so personal in such proximity is really positive for them. If we look at what the teachers said, really interesting. We looked at a whole range of comments and feedback from teachers, and really were able to group those comments into a number of themes. And one of the first themes was the affective responses, and that an event that I personally am always very proud of and feel is very buzzy and is great and is really involved in both the posters and the research fest. Teachers were commenting, you know, it was so much less noisy, it was so much more convenient, it was so pleasant, I could move around at the click of a button, I sort of wasn't elbowing my way around a room. It was a sensory overload when I go, it's too much distraction, it's too intrusive. And the very telling comment, you know, visitors gave more attention and stayed longer. And if we're looking to improve the quality of interaction, then actually we're not just really replacing, we are redefining this task. We are enhancing the quality of the interaction and amplifying the student voice, I think. So it's the conclusion that I'm starting to come to. Comments, aspects of our work that we consider indirectly that became very, very clear. Comments, a number about safer spaces. I felt at ease. It's easy with the camera. It feels like a safer space. The students are more inclined to talk. We had a hearing impaired student who would not have been able to complete that task if it had been in the live event because the background noise was just too much. We don't think about neurodiversity much, but this experience has certainly led us to think about the fact that not all students like to be surrounded by lots of people. They don't all like to engage in the way that we imagine as EAP teachers.
Stop you here, unfortunately, because we only have 4 minutes up until the next section.
Oh, really? Right. So really quickly then, the teachers. Sorry about that. No, don't worry. The teachers.
I was, you know, and I wanted to let you, elaborate more. It's just that I would just like to ask you a couple of questions that.
Sure, I'm going to just say one thing about this slide then, which is I'm going to just draw your attention to asynchronicity. and why students talk online. So first of all, that they take more responsibility, but also that asynchronous tools really help students prepare for these events, and that when we're thinking about interaction, we should think as much about asynchronicity as the face-to-face, as the live event, because that builds.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'll just put that there as a talking point, which is, well, we got this far, where next? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. I just have a question from Sturjani, who's interested to know more about the assessment criteria and the rubrics that you use for assessing the Vivas presentations that the students delivered in the online environment.
Me or you, Liz?
Just tell us a little bit.
Maybe Liz?
The criteria I put up very quickly are interaction, communication, language, and delivery. And there's a big focus on fluency and spontaneous interaction, because our Viva is a test of spoken English, and also we consider their ability to listen and respond appropriately. So those are all criteria of the Viva.
I think the question was also if there was any assessment of specific concepts that they used in their specific discipline, you know, any interaction skills with the audience, for example, taking questions, handling questions. Was this part of the assessment, or?
Sorry, I didn't understand what you said, Celia.
So Jenny was asking more about the rubric. So I think that your question had to do with whether you assessed, for example, discipline-specific concepts as well.
Ah, okay. No, that's not how we're not assessing them on their knowledge of their subject. Absolutely not. We can't. We don't even understand their subjects. It's absolutely only assessing their English. That's a bit of a joke, really. How we
Can I really
subject.
quickly answer some of the questions from the Mentimeter, because there were some really good ones coming in. Sorry, I think we've got 2 minutes, don't we? I'll do my best.
Yes,
So there was a really good question about how do you manage the fact that they're presenting in their disciplines, but if I've understood the question correctly, pairing the students and then getting them to present. So in terms of pairing the students, that was the classes in which they did the poster presentation or prepared the poster presentations were already subject specific. So you had chemistry group, you had a materials group, physics group, maths group. And so then within that, it was kind of up to them to choose someone who had a similar interest. However, it didn't always work perfectly. So sometimes you might have someone from maths working with someone from biochemistry, but then our way of kind of encouraging them is to make the point that science is so interdisciplinary these days that they need to be able to choose a topic, first of all, that covers both disciplines, which you can usually find, and also the fact that they're presenting to a general audience, so still an audience with a STEM background, but a mix. We also had some comments in the Mentimeter about the fact that students are in their living room.
I will need to stop us here now because it's already 12:30. Thank you so much, Rebecca, Julie, Elise, for an amazing presentation, and I'm really sorry that we didn't have enough time to discuss this. I will need now to hand over to our next speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you again for the presentation. Of course, the discussion can continue at the Padlet. Jolanda has already included the link in the chat box, and Penny has included the certificate of attendance. Thank you. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. Just received a message. Yes, I just posted the certificate of attendance again. Some people have issues. If you have any issue to attend, to download your certificate, please send me an email right away and I will send it to you to have your name fresh in my mind. So anyway, let's move on to the next session, a very interesting one again from the University of Leeds. We have Jane Heath and Denise DePaul. I hope I don't mispronounce your name, Denise. So the title of their presentation is If We Were on Campus, Reflections on Managing the Multiple Spaces of Online Teaching.